long philosophical discussion.
Yay!
If you're not ready,
I don't know about the voice.
you can decide you want to do something else because that's what we're doing tonight. It's okay?
Yes, if she gets the
Get mentally prepared. What's that? Okay, that's what that is. But I think you find it interesting. There's some story. Shishupal. Shishupal. Look at this. We're only 2 minutes late. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Jasodhanandana Brajajana Nandana Jasodhanandana Brajajana Nandana Jamana Tira Vanachari Jamana Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Jasodhanandana Brajajana Nandana Jasodhanandana Brajajana Nandana Jamana Tira Vanachari Jamana Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Vijnapad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gora Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tomorrow is special day, right? It's Wednesday. It's Nrsimha Chaturdasi. Very good. So that means today is the Trayodashi, right? Trayodashi becomes before Chaturdasi. Tuesday comes before Wednesday. So this is the topic in anticipation of Nrsimha Chaturdasi is the topic of the whole canto. The topic of the appearance of Lord Nrsimhadev comes in canto number 7. And canto number 7 comes right after canto number 6. And in the end of canto 6, there's big battle between demons and demigods, and Lord Vishnu comes and helps the demigods, and the demigods are victorious, which is nice. It wouldn't be so nice if the demons were victorious. But at the beginning of this chapter 1 of Canto 7, Maharaj Parikshit, this is what we discussed yesterday. Maharaj Parikshit asks a question. Why? Samoham sarva bhuteshu na me dveshosti na priyaha. The personality of Godhead is samoham, sama aham. He's equal to everyone. And name dvesha, he doesn't feel dvesha or negative feelings towards anyone, and nor priya, positive. So how come he's taking the sides of the demigods? Looks like he's partial, but he's supposed to be impartial. I'm puzzled. Can you please explain? And the response that comes from Shukadeva Goswami is he refers to another conversation, a prior conversation between Narada and Maharaj Yudhisthira. And the situation in that case is they're at the Rajasuya Yagya. They just witnessed Krishna beheading Shishupal right in the middle of the assembly, and looks like he's taking sides, but he's supposed to be neutral, so what's going on? That's kind of the question. That's like the circumstances. So Shukadeva says, this is a very good question. It was asked some time ago in this discussion. So it's the theme of the canto. Science of God is what the canto is called. And so we're going to hear something about the science of God. And we're going to start with text 1415 and then cover up to 25. Text 14, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Canto 7, Chapter 1, text 1415. O king, at the Rajasuya sacrifice, Maharaj Yudhisthira, the son of Maharaj Pandu, personally saw Shishupal merge into the body of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Therefore, struck with wonder, he inquired about the reason for this from the sage Narada, who was seated there. While he inquired, all the sages present also heard him ask the question. Text 16. Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired, "It is very wonderful that the demon Shishupal merged into the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though extremely envious. The Sayuja Mukti, this Sayuja Mukti is impossible to attain for even great transcendentalists. How then the enemy of the Lord attain it?" Prabhupada's purport: there are two classes of transcendentalists, the Gyanis and Bhaktas. The Bhaktas do not aspire to merge into the existence of the Lord, but the Gyanis do. Shishupal, however, was neither a Gyani nor a Bhakta, yet simply by envy of the Lord he attained an exalted position by merging into the Lord's body. Certainly this was astonishing, and therefore Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired about the cause of the Lord's mysterious mercy to Shishupal. So, in case you've ever wondered, now you're going to know, because the verses and commentaries explain. In the verse, the word ekantinam is used, and ekantinam means persons who are unattached to anything. And then that's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Jiva Goswami says ekantinam means the best of Gyanis, as in the following quote, which is 1.4.4. This is describing Shukadev. His son, Vyasadev's son, a great yogi, seeing all things equally, fully realized in Brahman, with mind concentrated on one goal, having dispelled ignorance, hid himself from the public and appeared to be a fool. In his Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami writes, citing this verse, Yudhisthira, text 16, 17, and 18. That we haven't gotten that far yet. We're only at 16. It is astonishing that the envious Shishupal attained Vasudeva. This attainment is difficult for even unattached persons. Vasudeva is difficult even for the great Gyanis or Ekantinam. It was not possible for him to attain the Lord because normally such persons go to hell. Quoted in the next verse, 17. "O sage, we desire to know. King Vena fell to hell through the Brahmanas for criticizing the Lord." And his commentary is from 7.1.17. Vena fell to hell, Tamasi. After much suffering in hell, it is said that by the influence of Prithu's birth from his body, he attained a good destination. It is in the Vamana Purana, it is said that after suffering in many different hells, Vena was rescued by the power of King Prithu. I didn't know that before, but now we know that. Shishupal is described in the text 18, which we're going to be reading shortly. From his childhood, when he could not even speak properly up until now, evil Shishupal, the son of Damagosh, was envious of Krishna. Now here's text 17 with more detail, but no purport. "Oh, great sage," this is Yudhisthira to Narada, "we are all eager to know the cause of this mercy of the Lord. I have heard that formerly a king named Vena blasphemed the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that all the Brahmanas consequently obliged him to go to hell. Shishupal should also have been sent to hell. How did he merge with the Lord's existence?" Text 18. "From the very beginning of his childhood, when he could not speak properly, Shishupal, the most sinful son of Damagosh, began blaspheming the Lord, and he continued to be envious of Krishna until death. Similarly, his brother Dantavakra continued the same habits." Vishwanath writes, "Kala bachanat means from when he could only a few soft words. He only speak a few soft words when a baby. And Jiva's Kramasandarbha says essentially the same. His criticism of the Lord was an imitation only. Becoming Dantavakra was also according to the Kumara's curse. So we're going to hear some more about this question. When they were doing those things, were they thinking we're just devotees doing those things for the Lord, or were they actually evil-spirited? Going to be touched on. Text 19. Although these two men, Shishupal and Dantavakra, repeatedly blasphemed the Supreme Personality Godhead, Lord Vishnu, or Krishna, the Supreme Brahman, they were quite healthy. Indeed, their tongues were not attacked by white leprosy, nor did they attain the darkest region of hellish life. We are certainly surprised by this. Purport. Krishna is described, this is Prabhupada's purport. Krishna is described by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 10:12 as follows. Param Brahma Param Dhamma Pavitram Paramam Bhavan. You are the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Abode and Purifier. Herein this is confirmed. Vishnum Yad Brahma Param Avyayam. The Supreme Vishnu is Krishna. Krishna is the cause of Vishnu, not vice versa. Similarly, Brahman is not the cause of Krishna, semicolon. Krishna is the cause of Brahman. Therefore, Krishna is the Parabrahman. Yad Brahma Param Avyayam. Because Param Brahma is used in the verse, so that's why that discussion, Vishwanath says Parabrahman means Krishna. And here's something interesting from Brihat Bhagavatamrita. Brihat Bhagavatamrita, Part 2, Chapter 2, Text 100, where it describes, now we're going to go into the philosophy part. The Supreme Lord by nature, this is the text, the bestower of ecstasy, creates such unlikely situations to delight his devotees by showing them the greatness of devotional service. And the commentary reads, when the finite self has been perceived in its true form, someone may argue, there remains no opportunity for mistakes and suffering. So, when the concentrated embodiment of the Supreme Truth, the Personality Godhead, infinite, has been perceived, how can faults and unhappiness possibly continue unabated? In the current verse, the sage Pipalayana clears this doubt. The Supreme Lord Narayana can do what is supposed to be impossible. Just as he can perform such a miracle as causing fire to give up its nature of emanating heat, he can hide his nature of giving joy to the entire universe. His reason for doing this is to demonstrate a particular feature of the glories of devotional service, namely, although bhakti, like the Lord himself, naturally emanates ecstasy without fail, only the Lord's devotee relishes bliss. The non-devotees taste the opposite feelings. When the Lord reveals this aspect of the glory of devotional service, those who are dedicated to him become enlivened, because they know that such examples will ultimately attract everyone to the bhakti process. How can the Lord make the essential character of his devotional service disappear? After all, fire can never stop giving heat. That may be true, but the Personality Godhead has manifold inconceivable energies, and by their arrangement, even when the Supreme Lord becomes visible, only persons endowed with pure devotion can taste ecstasy. Others cannot perceive it. Thus, we find that sometimes very advanced devotees express their approval of the fear, pain, and other such emotions suffered by non-devotees. This is elevated devotees say that's good. As Sri Yudhisthira said in connection with Shishupal and Dantavakra. This verse. Although these two men repeatedly blasphemed the Supreme Personality Godhead Lord Krishna, the Supreme Brahman, etc., we are most certainly surprised they didn't get leprosy of the tongue. Devotees like Yudhisthira approve of severe punishment for enemies of the Lord who indulge in criticizing and abusing the Lord, because the terrible fear and agony the offenders suffer in reaction severe as effective counteraction, prayaschitta, for their egregious sins, and in the end the offenders gain the highest benefit by becoming devotees. That doesn't explain how Shishupal got a good situation, but it's the astonishment that expressed here by Yudhisthira. How come he didn't suffer? Like, it would have been good for him. Although the idea is, as fire, as the heat capacity of fire may be taken away by the Supreme Lord, although heat's nature is fire's nature is heat. The Lord's presence in front of non-devotees, they should experience bliss. But when they don't experience bliss, that's good. How come he got this good result? So, next text, this is text number 20. How was it possible for Shishupal and Dantavakra, in the presence of many exalted persons, to enter very easily into the body of Krishna, whose nature is difficult to attain? Purport. Shishupal and Dantavakra were formerly Jain Vijay, the doorkeepers of Vaikuntha. Merging into the body of Krishna is not their final destination. Listen to this. For some time they remained merged, and later they received liberation. Sarupya and Salokya. Sarupya and Salokya. I mean, what does that mean? They became doorkeepers again. Living on the same planet as the Lord in the same bodily form. The Shastra gives evidence that if one blasphemes the Supreme Lord, his punishment is to remain in hellish life for many millions of years, more than one suffers by killing many brahmanas. Shishupal, however, instead of enduring hellish life, immediately and very easily received Sayuja Mukti. That such a privilege had been offered to Shishupal was not merely a story. Everyone saw it happen, and there was no scarcity of evidence. How did it happen? Maharaj Yudhisthira was very much surprised. Vishwanath writes, temporarily they merged into the Lord in the vision of those watching. Sayuja, mentioned verse 14, means they joined the Lord. For some time, they remained with him, and then they attained Sarupya. Yudhisthira would hear of Dantavakra's liberation from Narada later, because it did happen later, but it is expressed in the past tense because he understood Dantavakra would die. While others watched indicates that the impossible was proven by witnesses. So the stage is set for some profound answer. Text 21. This matter is undoubtedly very wonderful. Indeed, my intelligence has become disturbed, just as the flame of a candle is disturbed by a blowing wind. Oh, Narada Muni, you know everything. Kindly let me know the cause of this wonderful event. Purport. The Shastras enjoin from Munduka Upanishad, Tadvigyanartam Sagurum Eva Abhigachat, when one is perplexed by the difficult problems of life. To solve them, one must approach a guru like Narada or his representative in disciplic succession. Maharaj Yudhisthira therefore requested Narada to explain the cause for such a wonderful event. Vishwanath writes, "My intelligence wavers as the result of this event. Tell me the most astonishing cause, since you know everything." And then Krishna says, "What causes your intelligence to waver? Tell me the cause of their joining the Lord." And here's an essay and a little short article where Prabhupada discusses this. Still more clearly, it is explained in Laghu Bhagavatamrita by Sanatana Goswami as follows, quote, "In the Vishnu Purana, a question was put by Maitreya to Parashara as to how Shishupal merged into the body of Sri Krishna, although he could not do so in his previous births as Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, even though he was made to enjoy opulences more estimable than those enjoyed by the denizens of heaven." Sri Parashara replied as follows, "When Nrsingadev appeared," that's tomorrow, we're celebrating, "when Nrsingadev appeared before the demoniac king Hiranyakashipu, the latter could not recognize the Lord as such, but he took him as some powerful living being in the shape of man and lion combined. Neither could he think of that form of Godhead, being infuriated by the mode of passion, but only because he was touched by the Lord while being killed. In his next birth, he obtained the body of Ravana, a powerful demoniac king who was master of all interplanetary kingdoms. For this reason only, although he met personally the personality of Godhead, he was unable to obtain liberation on account of his mind being deluded away from the form of Godhead due to his being attracted to Sita in the mode of lust. When he therefore met the personality of Godhead face to face, he could not recognize him as the Supreme Lord, but he took him to be a powerful man only. So again, he was killed by the hand of Godhead, and for this reason only the same soul of Hiranyakashipu became a powerful king in the body of Shishupal." This is Prabhupada. As a descendant of King Chedi, he inherited immense property and kingdom. In this birth, he was able to recognize Vasudeva Krishna as the personality of Godhead, but on account of his enviousness towards Godhead for many births, he was unable to eradicate the feeling of animosity towards the Lord. That's important. As a result, he could not live without thinking of Krishna in all his activities of his life, namely, while eating, sleeping, traveling, sitting, and thinking. In fact, he was always compact in thought of Krishna's beautiful form. When he used to call him by ill names, at that time also he was absorbed in thought of Krishna. So up to the time of his death, he was able to chant the name of Krishna, as well as think of Krishna in the mode of animosity, and therefore, in the last moment, he was favored to see the Sudarshan Chakra. And in the rays of it, he could realize the Brahmajyoti of the personality of Godhead. This indirect realization, even though it was made possible by in inimical ways, made him liberated from all material impurities at once. And being thus killed by the Sudarshan Chakra, he merged into the body of the Lord. Unquote. That was the reply of Parashara to Maitreya. This is It is to be judged here what may be the destination of the devotees. If a soul in the mode of animosity like Shishupal can merge into the form of the Lord, then pure devotees who always engage in loving service to the Lord must enter into the eternal transcendental service of the Lord. There's no doubt about it. Now again, coming to the point of Hiranyakashipu not becoming liberated even though he was killed by the Lord, Jiva Goswami puts his arguments as follows. Quote, Hiranyakashipu could not recognize the form of the Lord Nrsimhadev as the incarnation of Vishnu. He mistook the Lord as some extraordinary living being in the form of half man, half lion. He was too much influenced by the mode of passion on account of his being defeated by the particular form of the Lord, and as a result, it was a puzzle for Hiranyakashipu to think of the Lord at the last moment of his life. Therefore, in his next birth, he became a great, powerful king like Ravana, with all the opulences in defiance of the same possessed by the King of Heaven. Absorption in the transcendental sense of Vishnu does not take place for want of sufficient knowledge in theism, as well as for want of sufficient enmity. That's the other side. There's good about being envious when you're thinking of the Lord. That's not recommended, but that's better than just being ignorant. If one is cognizant that his enemy is the personality of Godhead, then that sort of cognition faculty helps him more to liberation than impersonal vague idea of absolute truth. The thing required is complete absorption. I put it in real big letters. The thing that is required is complete absorption. One cannot attain such stage of absorption by impersonal way of thinking. Personal thinking, even in the status of an enemy, causes absorption more easily than thinking. This fact is corroborated in Bhagavad Gita also, that the impersonal way of attraction is more painful than the personal way of attraction, although the supreme truth is both personal and impersonal. By absorption only can one be freed from all the material infection, and that means liberation. On account of such paucity of absorption of Hiranyakashipu, he was not liberated from material bondage, even though the Lord was present before his eyes. Unless we have, therefore, perfection of knowledge about the Lord's name, form, qualities, etc., we cannot see God, even he is present before us. In this body of Shishupal, he was cognizant of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he knew it also that in his 2 previous births he was killed by the Personality of Godhead. This fact of being killed twice by the Personality of Godhead made him more inimical towards Krishna. This enmity was so tense and acute that Shishupal remained always absorbed in thought of Krishna, and indirectly he was benefited for uttering the holy name of Krishna. As a result of this chanting of Lord Krishna's name, King Shishupal was able to visualize the 4-handed form of Godhead, Sri Vishnu, and he recognized him as the Supreme Lord. On account of such absorption into Krishna, for constantly thinking and singing about him, even though some psychic actions were unfavorable, he, Shishupal, became totally freed from material infections. And the demoniac tendency being completely removed, he was able to see the Brahmajyoti from the Sudarshan disc flung by the Lord. and he got salvation, being merged into the body of the Lord. Special instruction on this statement is to be understood in the fact that the primeval Lord, even though he is thought of in absorption constantly in the mode of animosity, gives salvation to his enemy, and what to speak of his servitors, constantly engaged in transcendental loving service. There's caution about trying to get into the enmity program. Shukadeva Goswami continues our response. The beginning of the canto, Shukadeva and Maharaj Parikshit, Shukadeva is expressing this question by Yudhisthira to Narada. Now he's going back. Shukadeva Goswami said, after hearing the request of Maharaj Yudhisthira, Narada Muni, the most powerful spiritual master who knew everything, was very pleased. Thus he replied in the presence of everyone taking part in the yajna. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes the Sanskrit, which means, while the assembly listened to the talk. Abhasya means calling to the king. O king, please understand this. And now a little section from Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, Anuchhed 315. Narada Muni gave this reply. To whom do you refer when you say that a person who offends the Supreme Personality must go to hell? Do you refer to a person who gives suffering to the Lord? Or, if you do not refer to such a person, do you refer to a person who offends the Lord by drinking liquor and performing other forbidden acts? They're sinful. Who should see hell? The sinful person or the one who is bringing suffering to the Lord? The bewildered conditioned souls have the power to blaspheme and offend only things created from the material modes of ignorance, passion, and goodness. They who have taken shelter of the material nature do not have the power to blaspheme or offend a person whose form, qualities, and other features are not material. Unlike the conditioned souls, the Supreme Personality Godhead does not identify himself as a product of material nature. Therefore, he is never troubled. That was, you give trouble. You can't give trouble. He is never troubled by the offenses committed by the conditioned souls. This is explained in the following 3.5 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, including this one. O king, blasphemy and praise, text 22. Blasphemy and praise, chastisement and respect, there's opposites, are experienced because of ignorance. The body of the conditioned soul is planned by the Lord for suffering in the material world through the agency of the external energy. An explanation. Nindhanam means describing faults, and yakkara means eclipsed. This means for making one aware of praise, criticism, and other dualities. Then the verse explains, the body of the conditioned soul is planned by the Lord for suffering in the material world through the agency of the external energy. The great sage, this is next text, 23. The great sage Naradaji said, O king, blasphemy and praise, chastisement and respect are experienced because of ignorance. The body of the conditioned soul is planned by the Lord for suffering in the material world through the agency of external energy. This is Prabhupada's purport. And Bhagavad Gita, 1861, it is said, this is long purport, Prabhupada, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Judeshir Arjuna Tishtati verse. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart. O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of material energy, unquote. A material body is manufactured by the external energy according to the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The conditioned soul, being seated on this machine, wanders throughout the universe. And because his bodily conception of life, he only suffers. Actually, the suffering of being blasphemed and the enjoyment of being praised, the acceptance of a good welcome or chastisement by harsh words are felt in the material conception of life. But since the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not material but Satchit Ananda Vigraha, he is unaffected by insults or greetings, blasphemy or prayers. Being always unaffected and complete, he does not feel extra pleasure when offered nice prayers by the devotee, although the devotee benefits by offering prayers to the Lord. Indeed, the Lord is very kind to his so-called enemy, because one who always thinks of the personality of Godhead as an enemy also benefits, although he thinks of the Lord adversely. If a conditioned soul, thinking of the Lord as an enemy or a friend, somehow or other becomes attached to the Lord, he receives great benefit. It's a mystery, huh? Vishwanath. In order to explain that the Lord was not pained by the criticism of Shishupal, he first explains that the Gyanis do not feel happiness or distress by praise or criticism. Only persons attached to the body react with happiness and distress. The body, which is a cause of verbal criticism and praise, bodily and mental respect and disrespect, is produced by lack of distinction of Atma and the non-Atma. And here's some more from Jiva Goswami, from Bhakti Sandarbha 3:15. Foolish people partake of criticism and other acts aimed at persons in the three gunas. A criticism of persons within the gunas cannot extend to the Lord, whose form is made of spiritual qualities. The Lord does not identify with anything in the material world, unlike the jiva, therefore he cannot be afflicted. Narada replies, what was your intention in asking that an offender of the Lord should go to hell? That was these two. Does to hurt the Lord or sin? Foolish persons partake of criticism and other acts. This is the same language. Okay. He's again quoting this verse, or the previous verse 23. A body subject to criticism and praise, honor and dishonor is created by lack of discrimination between the self and the non-self. Nindana means broadcasting someone's faults. Nyakara means contempt. The bodies of the jivas are made with no ability to discriminate between matter and spirit for the purpose of perceiving criticism, praise, honor, and condemnation. So skipping a few verses and we're reaching an end. Text 26. Therefore, by enmity or by devotional service, by fear, by affection, or by lusty desire, by all of these, or any one of them, a conditioned soul somehow or other concentrates his mind upon the Lord, the result is the same. For the Lord, because of his blissful position, is never affected by enmity or friendship. Purport. From this verse, one should not conclude that because Krishna is unaffected by favorable prayers or unfavorable blasphemy, one should therefore blaspheme the Supreme Lord. This is not the regular principle. Bhakti Yoga means Anukulyena Krishnadoshilanam. one should serve the Lord very favorably. This is the real injunction. Here it is said that although an enemy thinks of Krishna unfavorably, the Lord is unaffected by such anti-devotional service. Thus, he, Krishna, offers his benedictions even to Shishupal and similarly inimical conditioned souls. This does not mean, however, that one should be inimical to the Lord, towards the Lord. The stress is given to the favorable execution of devotional service, not purposeful blasphemy of the Lord. It is said, Nindam Bhagavata Shrinvans, etc. One who hears blasphemy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee should immediately take action, or should leave. Otherwise he will be put into hellish life perpetually. There are such injunctions, therefore, as a regular principle, one should not be unfavorable towards the Lord, but always favorably inclined towards him. Paragraph. Shishupal's achievement of oneness with the Supreme Lord was different because Jai Vijay, from the very beginning of their material existence, were ordained to treat the Supreme Lord as an enemy for 3 lives and thus return home back to Godhead. Here we go. Jai and Vijay inwardly knew that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they purposely became his enemies to be delivered from material life. From the very beginning of their lives, they thought of Lord Krishna as an enemy. And even though blaspheming Lord Krishna, they chanted the holy name of Krishna constantly, along with their inimical thoughts. Thus, they were purified because of chanting the holy name of Krishna. It is to be understood that even a blasphemer can be freed from sinful activities by the chanting of the holy name. Certainly, therefore, freedom is assured for a devotee who is always favorable to the service of the Lord. This will be clear from the following verse. By rapt attention fixed on Krishna, one is purified, and thus one is delivered from material life. Vishwanath Chakravarti has very nicely explained the word bhayena, which means by fear. When the gopis went to Krishna in the dead of night, they certainly feared chastisement by their relatives, their husbands, brothers, and fathers. But nonetheless, not caring for their relatives, they went to Krishna. There was certainly fear, but this fear could not check their devotional service to Krishna. One should not mistakenly think that Lord Krishna must be worshipped in an inimical attitude, like that of Shishupal. Again, the injunction is anukul yasya, slightly different here, grahanam, pratikul yasya varjanam. One should give up unfavorable activities and accept only favorable conditions in devotional service. Generally, if one blasphemes the Supreme Personality of God, it is punished, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 16:19. Tad aham dvishatak kruran. There are many such injunctions. One should not try to worship Krishna unfavorably, otherwise he must be punished, at least for 1 life, to be purified. As one should not try to kill by embracing an enemy, a tiger or a snake, one should not blaspheme the Supreme Personality of Godhead and become his enemy in order to be put into hellish life. The purpose of this verse is to emphasize that even the enemy of the Lord can be delivered, not to speak of his friend. Srila Madhvacharya also says in many ways that one should not blaspheme Lord Vishnu through one's mind, words, or actions, for a blasphemer will go to hellish life along with his forefathers. And there's some quotes. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are lowest to mankind, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Attaining repeated birth among the species of demoniac life, such persons can never approach me. Gradually they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. Unquote. One who blasphemes the Lord is put into a family of asuras, in which there is every chance of forgetting the service of the Lord. More quotes from Bhagavad Gita. Buddhas, or rascals, blaspheme the Supreme Lord because he appears exactly like a human being. They do not know the unlimited opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And goes on. As for Hiranyakashipu, although he was extremely inimical toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he always thought of his son, Prahlad, who was a great devotee. Therefore, by the grace of his son, Prahlad Maharaj, Hiranyakashipu was also delivered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hiranyakashipu's chapi Bhagavan nindaya tamaha. The conclusion is, long explanation. The conclusion is that one should not give up pure devotional service. For one's own benefit, one should not imitate Hiranyakashipu or Shishupal. That is not the way to achieve success. And much simpler here is Vishwanath writes, one might wonder, what is wrong with criticizing the Lord since it does not affect the Lord in any way? The criticizer will generate bad karma for himself. That is stated in the scriptures. One who hears blasphemy of the Supreme Lord or his devotee should immediately take action or should leave, otherwise he will be put into hellish life. This is true. There are two types of criticism, favorable and unfavorable. The favorable type of criticism is transformed into prema, or is a transformation of prema. And he gives a reference from the gopis. Like a hunter, Ram cruelly shot the king of the monkeys with arrows. Because he was conquered by a woman, he disfigured another woman who came to him with lusty desires. And even after consuming the gifts of Bali Maharaj, he bound him up with ropes as if he were a crow. So let us give up all friendship with this dark complexioned boy, even if we can't give up talking about him. So that's favorable criticism. This is a spurt of light from the crest jewel of prema, not attained by anyone except the gopis. Unfavorable criticism has two types. That was favorable criticism. That arising from absorption in the Lord, and that which does not arise from absorption in the Lord. The first type takes place in Shishupal. The bad karma created by his criticism was destroyed immediately by his absorption in the Lord. By Bhakti Yoga, he attained a neutral condition. How's he engaged in Bhakti Yoga? Or, anyway. And then attained qualifications for Vaidhi Bhakti. That is now described in 7 verses, the coming verses. The meaning of the first statement in this verse, therefore, is, since the Lord is not pained by criticism, and the sins of the criticizer are destroyed by that absorption, the mind should concentrate on the Lord with absorption as an enemy. Nirvairena means without enmity. With Bhakti Yoga, it refers to parental or other relationships mentioned in as sambandha in verse 31, this chapter. Okay. One should not see the Lord differently at all. One should directly see him according to one's emotions. However, in the case of those who have enmity or fear, because these two, this is played upon in these verses, these two emotions, enmity and fear towards the Lord, because who was fear? Kamsa. And enmity was Shishupal. The word means, quote, either of these persons having hatred or fear does not see himself different from the Lord, unquote. By attaining Sayuja, they realize themselves non-different from him. One statement can have a different meaning according to a difference in the person in question. Little tricky analysis, but so there's favorable criticism and there's unfavorable criticism. And the unfavorable one is like Shishupal. One of the categories is Shishupal. His mind was absorbed in Krishna. And others are just, their mind is not absorbed in Krishna, they're just criticizing. The mind should become absorbed in the Lord by continuous enmity or by bhakti or conjugal feelings. This is the command. This, however, cannot apply to Shishupal and others since they have no attraction for the Lord. There's enmity. One cannot also explain this as an order for other persons to have enmity towards the Lord, seeing the example of Shishupal and others, since it is impossible to make a command to a devotee to do something unfavorable to the Lord. It is said, Anukul Yasha, we are hearing Sankalpa, Grahanam, Pratikul Yasha Varjanam. Those who surrender to the Lord accept what is favorable and reject what is unfavorable for the Lord, nor does continuous enmity directed towards other people by Shishupal generate absorption in the Lord. For this is contrary to thousands of contrary statements. Quotes some of them. Almost done. One should also not say that continuous enmity for the Lord after producing genuine attraction for the Lord will not produce hell, since the genuine attraction did not occur in Shishupal. One should also not say that this is an arrangement for persons other than Shishupal, since one cannot find actions directed with enmity to the Lord in all the rules of Scripture. Paragraph. His enmity certainly created absorption in the Lord. By understanding that the Lord would kill him, he heard, saw, and respected the Lord, just as a person, understanding that a tiger or a snake will kill him, becomes absorbed in that animal with fear, and not with any other object. Continuous enmity. Anubandhena. What type of enmity is necessary? Anubandhena should be there. And this produces complete absorption in the Lord. One who has continuous enmity has absorption in the Lord. Weak enmity is excluded. Absorption Abbas. It's a philosophical point, and how did that happen? That he attained liberation. So we've heard this. The main question is in regards to Shishupal, and we're getting the benefit because tomorrow is. It's within the canto as well. Hiranyakashipu and what happened to Hiranyakashipu. That's different than what happened to Shishupal. I mean, he didn't have an understanding of Vishnu as divinity, and Shishupal somehow did. We don't have. It doesn't explain how he understood that. It just explains that he understood that. But he also understood there's two things. He had lifetimes of enmity, and so it was a carryover enmity. And he knew he was going to be killed by the Lord, whereas Ravana and Hiranyakashipu didn't. So even he knew he was going to be killed by the Lord. Look what he did in the public assembly, vilifying 100 times. Absorption. And we're going to hear tomorrow morning, because something similar, or different but similar, different but related. The Sudarshan Chakra, this is from the Jagannath Mahatmya, there's a book, and it makes the comparison of Lord Nrsingadev to the closest amongst Nrsinga, Rama, and Krishna. Nrsinga is the closest in many ways, and one of them is he doesn't have parents, but another is Jagannath has a Sudarshan Chakra, and Sudarshan Chakra is said to be an expansion of Lord Nrsingadev, somehow, or representative of Lord Nrsingadev. So Shishupal saw the Sudarshan Chakra coming, and he saw the Brahmajyoti merged. So it with absorption in enmity. I mean, it goes on. The chapter goes on. It's mysterious. Narada says actually it's easier to become absorbed in enmity than the other way, no enmity, because they have lots of objects of attraction and affection out there. So, but enmity is very focused. The mind becomes very focused, and we follow the mind. I mean, the senses follow the mind. Where the mind goes, the senses go. No, it can't be said the other way. Where the senses go, the mind goes. But this mind, what the mind is the chief, and therefore our process is hearing, and it not just the mechanical kind. It's the spiritual ear, hearing, and by that hearing, cleansing, and the mind becomes fixed. And so the attainment is absorption in the sound of this specific Mahamantra, but also Harikatha. So it's all, our Acharyas are having a great time. It's kind of long-winded in one sense, and people that don't have philosophical inclination get, tell some stories, please. But behind the stories, there's an explanation of why such topics as the slaying of Shishupal, the slaying of Hiranyakashipu, and the slaying of Ravana, it's also purifying for us to hear. The momentum of absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and of course also the lessons of the inimical attitude of these three demons, adds to the absorption through the sound vibration. So just step back a little bit. In this seventh canto, we hear both the story of the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev and the prayers of Prahlad. And so we get this really nice picture of the Supreme Personality of Godhead being very kind to his devotee, and at the same time very, very kind to the non-devotee, because he was relieved. I mean, so one of the questions came specific to Lord Nrsingadev and Hiranyakashipu, what kind of liberation? It was said that he got liberated, but then he came back later. So how was he liberated? Well, he was liberated in the sense that the sinful reactions were neutralized, that kind of liberation. His slate was made clean. And for somebody like that to make a slate clean, that's a big deal. His slate was made clean. But not the other kind of liberation, not the kind of liberation that Shishupal achieved. The third time around, so they could go back. So that third time around had these elements so they could go back. Enmity, non-stop. I haven't read the section, but I've heard it many times from Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj, so I say it. The day that Shishupal was born, he screamed just when he heard Krishna's name. Children sometimes cry. Do you sometimes cry? Yeah. But he didn't just cry, he screamed. And the whole earth was trembling. And it didn't stop. They went and got doctors, and it went on for a whole month, day and night, screaming, just hearing Krishna's name. I don't know where in scripture it says that, but he says it, so I trust him. Enmity to the max, non-stop. And saying his name again and again. In enmity. Very focused mind. Leading up to the Sudarshan Chakran, seeing the Brahmajyoti, realizing the Brahmajyoti and merging into the body of Krishna. And then that Sayuja for some time, and then returning to Jai and Vijay position, right, along with Dantavakra. So Hiranyakashipu wasn't so fortunate. Because his conscious, he wasn't seeing the form as the personality of Godhead. He saw the form in a different way. Some half man, half lion, what is this? Some entity, some powerful, but I'm more powerful, I'm the most powerful, here I go. I'll kill him. So he didn't have that absorption. Although he certainly saw Vishnu as his enemy because his brother was killed, he saw Vishnu as his enemy. But not in the same way, not with the same fullness of absorption as Shishupal. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. I've been hearing from some devotees that we're having these discussions. It's like it all went over their head. What was all that about? But let's see what our discussion is. It's purifying just to hear. It's the Bhagavatam and our great acharyas, and we're meant to understand some things. Krishna doesn't have a material body, so he cannot be offended, because offense is for those who have a material body, they make offense, and those that receive it feel offense. He has no contact with anything material. He's not feeling any of those things. Although he speaks as if he does, but he's just reciprocating with the mood of the person, the devotee, the non-devotee. So let's see if there's discussion. Any in the room here? You have something?
So, Guru Maharaj, you were explaining that Krishna is not affected by praise and the opposite, blasphemy. And yet we see the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj please Lord Nrsimhadev beyond the pleasure that he obtains from the prayers of the demigods.
Yes.
The gopis' prayers please Krishna. Could you explain that, please?
It's bhakti. That's the principle. So the bhakti of the demigods is mixed, and the bhakti of Prahlad is unmixed. And it's the bhakti principle. This feeds into one of your earlier questions, I think yesterday. Forget exactly how you worded it, but is how important is it that we are thinking in terms of bhakti when the Lord will reciprocate with our devotional prayers. So anyway, it's the quality of love, and even the quality of love of the gopis or the residents of Braja surpasses that of intimacy-wise. It surpasses that even of Prahlad. We're in thin ice if we start saying, this one's better than that one, because pure devotee is a pure devotee is a pure devotee. So we don't start speaking in demeaning terms of a pure devotee. But the intimacy of different devotees may be greater than others, and that intimacy of love is reciprocated with by the Supreme Lord. He finds that most appealing. But there's all rasa within the Supreme Lord, not only way over on this side. There's everything. Okay, so I'm over answering your question.
So there was a statement, anti-devotional service.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard that one before.
And is it a correct understanding that Krishna is displeased with blasphemy, such as we see, Lord Chaitanya is displeased with Jagai and Madai. He's ready to chop off their heads.
Well, they were criticizing, not just only criticizing, they physically harmed Lord Nityananda. So for himself, no problem. For the devotee, a problem. So like in Prahlad, he was displeased. But it's a transcendental displeasure. But it's a displeasure. And at once Lord Chaitanya's displeasure was mitigated by the appeal of Lord Nityananda. And I won't forgive them unless they... So there was some condition in his anger subsiding. The transcendental anger. And then they then it was over. Then Lord Chaitanya said to the people, never criticize them for what they were in the past. They're now devotees. Don't look back upon their past. Don't speak like that. And then to Jai Vijay, don't do these things again. And they didn't. Okay. Yeah.
I chant 9 rounds every day.
You do what?
Chant 9 rounds every day.
9 rounds.
Yes. And in the last few rounds, I get distracted.
No.
What should I do about it?
Chant fewer rounds, maybe. No. I was teasing you. Don't take that seriously. You by practice, let's go back to when you weren't chanting, or then you started chanting. When you started chanting from not chanting, were you distracted?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But then somehow multiple reasons, you started feeling some happiness. I know another, I won't say the devotee's name, but another young devotee, close to your same age. his parents have been really careful about not pushing him, but he's now liking chanting, and they're like, "Wow, don't tell anybody, but yay!" And he just likes it, and he likes it for reasons that maybe not the same reason that you like it or that I like it, but. I mean, one of the things that he said to his parents is, "Oh, that schoolwork, just like my mind gets all wrapped up in the schoolwork, and I don't have to think about that stuff." Shanti. And, he likes chanting, that he likes the experience of connecting with Krishna instead of, moving material stuff. But, anyway, I'm sure there's something else going on besides that one. The distraction has to do with layers of contamination and layers of contamination, and more layers of contamination and more layers, and there's lots of contamination. So because you've been born in a devotee family, you've got a head start. Who knows what you were doing in your last life, unless several lives, and so you are where you are, and there's still more contamination. So that's the cause, and what to do is you continue cleansing. And in that effort to continue cleansing, focus on not what you want to get from Krishna, but what you want to be in your connection with Krishna. Make it as an offering unto him, whatever I'm feeling. I mean, we're in Chicago, and it's maybe you like it in the cold. Some people don't like it in the cold. But it's cold, so you just it's cold. How come it's not warm in Chicago? Because it's cold climate. So, but it's very pleasant in the summer. Some places where it's hot climate, it's like the winter. Summer is, I'm going north. You know who Ambarish Prabhu is? Henry Ford's grandson that helped build the TOVP. You've heard his name? You know who Henry Ford is? You've heard Ford Motor Company? Yeah. Okay. Henry Ford is the man who started the Ford Motor Company. And his grandson is a Hare Krishna devotee. And he inherited some of the wealth of the Ford family. And he lives in Florida. And it's really hot in the summer in Florida. So after his mother died, she had a nice place in Maine, so he goes there in the summer. Summer home, then back into Florida in the winter. It's like birds, they fly south in the winter, and then north in the summer. They're smart. So is Ambarish. He goes. So yeah, otherwise you just tolerate. So in the mind, just don't pay attention to the mind says I'm distracted. I mean, you deal with it. You deal with it by striving for further purification. It's just a sign that I got more work to do. And then what's that work is same word that we're using, absorption and hearing. Let the mind just hear. Through the ear, the sound. While you're doing that, there's distraction. Continue, and gradually the cleansing and becomes absorption instead of distraction. Just through cleansing, through hearing. No? Okay. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, even though I've studied this section before, I've never understood
This way.
this way. that the absorption in Krishna, in fear and in enmity, is what led him to liberation, whereas Hiranyakashipu and then after him Kamsa,
Ravana.
Ravana did not. And then the question I had is, I think I recall you speaking from Acharya commentary that as the Sudarshan Chakra was coming towards him, he saw the Brahmajyoti,
Yeah, he or realized, at least it says that.
and he became purified through that,
Yeah.
like instantly. Seemed like instantly. That was a little confusing because consciousness purification generally is a
Well, he was chanting Namabas in derision. It's one of the forms of Namabas. That's what we're doing. Not the same, not derision kind, but distracted kind. Namabas. So he was sins were being, the purification was taking place even then. And by constant remembrance, in enmity, purification. It wasn't like, but there was an event that helped carry him the rest of the way.
So even in our lives, even though we may not be, we may be distracted as we are today, at the end of life, there's a potential to even go all the way
Yeah, yes.
by the special mercy.
Mercy, yeah. I forgot to read some pastimes of Lord Nrsimhadev, but go ahead. Go ahead. Give you some more. You have some online questions?
Yeah,
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is from Sanchari Mataji. She says, it's a little long, so let me try to encapsulate it. There are 3 different levels of devotees, and each have certain qualifications that allow for them to give criticism to those that are not necessarily below them, but those that they can extend their kindness to. For those that are correctly situated in the higher levels, the balance and the love embedded in that instruction or correction comes through. And we know this based on the relationship we have with them. Even among peers, this understanding comes from having a relationship. How do we react to those who we don't have a relationship with how do we react to those who we don't have a relationship with, who correct us without our reactions causing us to fall into the inimical category? And part 2, conversely, how do we keep the familiarity of those whom we have relationships with block us from receiving instruction properly?
Well, somebody asked me this question in the last couple of days in some email. And there's different things you can do. A lot of it depends on how much you, the person asking the question, or anyone else out there, is beyond the bodily conception of life. So one of the first things to do is, check yourself and see, am I in the bodily conception of life? And if you're feeling some discomfort when somebody said, it's right in the verses that we read. Due to ignorance, we'll feel hurt when somebody we don't have a relationship with says something, a point of correction or criticism or whatever. It's because of our ignorance that we feel that feeling. So, what are our options? That depends on how deep one is in the bodily conception of life, which of the various options that one can choose from. There's a whole menu of options. One of the beginning ones, right in Bhagavad Gita, is you tolerate. And tolerate doesn't mean just like, bite a bullet. You growl and I'll tolerate you. So that's not what tolerate means. It's just like a tree. It just doesn't affect you. Tolerant like a tree. You go on serving. Tolerant means you go on serving. You go on serving. You go to your constitutional position of being a servant. And the situation, the configuration of duality, that's my language. It moves this way, you tolerate it. Moves that way, you tolerate it. You remain neutral towards today's or this moment's particular configuration of duality. And you stay fixed in the conception of the self. I'm Krishna's servant. So then you can start to consider what are the best means of service in this situation towards this individual or towards myself or towards the world. And yes, you go to the position of the mood of service, non-specific to that person and the words that they said that were critical or whatever it was that you found disturbing. In that way, you're reducing the influence of ignorance upon yourself from Prakriti, material nature, and you're going more towards the quality of goodness. So tolerance can lead to forgiveness, but also you can be a little forgiving of yourself for being in ignorance, for being disturbed by something that has nothing to do with you. And struggle. So that's this, Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. So there's lots of things that one can do. But the main goal is to go beyond the bodily conception of life. So I guess you can thank that person for helping you and your journey of going beyond the bodily conception of life. Thank you so much. But not in the false sense or cosmetic sense, but in a spiritual sense. Try to go to the spiritual conception of life somehow or other. Mode of goodness is a good path to get there. Okay.
She had a part 2, which was, conversely, how do we keep the familiarity of those whom we have relationships with block us from receiving instruction properly?
Well, if you're eager to progress spiritually, and you have some well-wishers, consider your good fortune. The main thing is to consider they are your well-wishers, and it's good fortune that you have well-wishers, and be open.
This is from Uttama Bhakta Prabhu. He says, Lord Narasimha Dev appeared in response to precise boons. He is present in the spiritual world now. Was he present before? Please enlighten.
He's present everywhere at all times. That's we're going to hear that tomorrow morning. He's present everywhere at all times. His appearance is occasional, but he's present everywhere at all times.
This is from Rupalas Prabhu. He asks, is progression from Sayujya Mukti to Salokya Mukti only an exceptional case with Shishupal?
Yes.
And the last question that I have here says, it's from VC. I think this is Hari from Boston that was in Vizag. What does it mean that the Lord is equal to all, but deals differently? Isn't that contradictory in some sense? In normal experience, the way we deal with someone encapsulate what we feel for them.
Well, his question is exactly the topic that we discussed yesterday evening and this evening. So I suggest you go back and read and hear, because your question is exactly the topic we spent an hour and a half, 2 evenings discussing. His behavior may look, by material examination, to be discriminating or partiality, but it's not. It's appearance only. That's the principle. So go listen again, read again, and see if you get clarity with your question. Stay focused on what your question is, because what you want to know is exactly what Maharaj Parikshit wanted to know, which is exactly what Maharaj Yudhisthira wanted to know, which is exactly what's being discussed. And the whole canto is on that topic. So it's an important question. The whole canto is dedicated to it, in certain ways at least. And when by understanding the answer, we'll understand, Krishna is a worthy person to take shelter of. He's the best of persons to take shelter of. There isn't anyone equal to him to take shelter of. Okay? So that's it. I'm surprised. Yes, something further.
I have several questions, Guru Maharaj. Yudhishthir Maharaj was expressing that his intelligence is perplexed.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we know that Yudhishthir Maharaj is pure devotee.
Yes.
So how to know the qualitative difference between, of course,
When we're perplexed and when he's perplexed.
when we are perplexed and yet we are being faithful, versus when we're perplexed and we're on the wrong track, where we're diverting from our position of faithfulness.
Well, a simple answer, it's subtle, first of all. And you look at a thing over time, that's another. That is to say, is the perplexity a particular time, place, circumstance, or is it an overall experience? Another is, we're not yet pure, but so you're not asking, you can say it positively, that is, as we're approaching consciousness that becomes pure and we're feeling perplexed, what are the symptoms of that? So it's just, you judge a thing over time. It's something like the Apichet Sudharacharo verse, where bad behavior that's just circumstantial is different than bad behavior that's all the time. So if one's attention, let's just say attentive or inattentive chanting, is our inattentiveness due to just material attraction, or inattentiveness is we are faithful, it's just there's more cleansing to be done. It's subtle, but how much effort, how much devotional, this is the bhakti principle, devotional effort is being applied consistently in the course of this morning and the next morning and the next morning and the next period of time. Anyway, so that is my response. On Saturday, we had a little Western people, little Sangha, Zoom thing. And one of the devotees is kind of like the organizer of some others, and he's been chanting for 10 years. And he was describing what his chanting is like. And he wanted to know, is he doing it right? And I said, I've been chanting for 50 years. And he went, oh. So the real test is, this is responsive to your question. The real test is there absorption in the sound? Because you could say it in different ways, but absorption of the sound means many things. That if you absorb in the sound, the ear is absorbed, the tongue is absorbed, the heart is absorbed, and there's going to be some experience, without going into detail of what each of those things are. And that's the fruit of a sincere devotional effort over time. It's like your son's question about chanting 9 rounds, and some of them towards the end are more distracted than the beginning ones. So, over a period of time. And the refinement. Am I making this effort to recalibrate once again and again and again and again the quality of intention? That's a devotional effort. Krishna is to be pleased. As that bhakti force consistently being applied over time, and that's a good barometer. And you see over time. You introspect and see over time. And then that ties into what your question was. And it's, we're in this fuzzy area because we're mixed. So move towards unmixed, and these are some of the standards of moving towards unmixed, of that perplexity that's due to different causes. Okay.
I've found it interesting that one of the births of Jay and Vijay is Shishupal and Dantavakra, because we usually think of Kamsa as the biggest demon of those times. I'm not aware of much about Dantavakra. Is there information?
He's secondary, much like Kumbhakarna, the secondary. I mean, there's more about Hiranyaksha than about Kumbhakarna and Dantavakra. There's not a whole lot. I mean, I can't offer you much. I'm sure there must be something somewhere, but I haven't gone there yet. So I can't say much.
Guru Maharaj, we know that pious activities or good karma does not create bhakti or devotional service.
Right.
I find it interesting that, on the other hand, bad karma inhibits bhakti. Now, it's very natural, if we're doing, for example, sinful activities, of course, it inhibits bhakti. Yet, on the other hand, we know bhakti is completely transcendental, and we hear of how, we don't judge a book by its cover. There are great devotees that, look very ostentatious. That's not, bad karma per se, but could you elaborate on how come?
Well, my understanding is this, twofold. Bhakti has the power to eliminate karma. And then the other part of the twofold is, however, that karma results from activity which results from the modes of nature. So the inclination to be involved in the modes of nature doesn't change quickly. Guna doesn't change quickly. Like the Prayaschitta process, and you confess and the sins are gone, and then you go and do it again. Why do it again? Because of the guna. So Bhakti has the power to change gunas too, but that's more slow than remove the effects of past karma. Okay? More online.
This one.
Okay.
This is from Hemnand. How to handle the ups and downs in one's bhakti. Some days I feel enthusiastic, and some days we feel not so enthusiastic.
Welcome to the club. So, I mean, how to handle it is try to become steady. The unsteadiness has to do with anarthas, and you do your anartha nivritti program by strong bhajana kriya. That's how to handle it. She's got another one.
Did I understand correctly, Guru Maharaj, that it's better to be inimical to the Lord and absorbed like that rather than being an impersonalist?
Yeah.
I mean, not that we're striving for
Yeah,
either of
that's
those.
better to be absorbed in the Lord one way or another than just be an impersonalist. Yes. It's puzzling, but that's what's being said. And there's more in the coming verses in this first chapter. It's really graphic and really very specific. So, thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.